The story begins with a young woman who has suffered a great loss and finds herself in a painful, lonely situation. She is alone and pregnant, facing life without support or stability. She struggles with fear, uncertainty, and the harsh judgment of society because she's raising a child without a partner. Her situation is not just emotionally challenging, she also has no stable home or clear future, and her chances of thriving seem bleak. At her lowest moment, she crosses paths with a widowed ranch owner, a strong, serious man who has been hardened by life and his own personal losses. This ranch owner lost his wife some time ago and has been raising his land and livestock in solitude ever since. He is known in the community as a reliable but distant figure, a man shaped by work, routine, and quiet resilience. Although he has grief in his past, he hasn't given up on life entirely. His ranch is a symbol of stability, and his neighbors respect him for his diligence and determination. YouTube. When the pregnant woman meets the ranch owner, she expects judgment or rejection. Instead, his reaction surprises her, and the viewers. Rather than treating her with cold detachment, he offers a bold, life-changing proposal. From today, you are my wife. At first, his words seem harsh and almost domineering. But if you look deeper, there's something unexpected behind his decision. He is not forcing her into anything out of pride or control. He sees her suffering and understands the struggle of living without someone to rely on. For him, this is not an act of dominance, it is a gesture of compassion and shared humanity. YouTube. The woman is stunned. She was expecting more pain and criticism, not an offer of protection and companionship. She has been guarded for so long that trust does not come easily. Over time, however, she begins to see that the ranch owner's gesture comes from sincerity rather than self-interest. He understands what it feels like to be broken by life, and he does not want her to go through more hardships alone. His offer changes the course of her life, not by diminishing her identity, but by giving her a chance at stability, care, and a renewed sense of belonging. YouTube. As she agrees to live with him, the story becomes about healing, resilience, and acceptance. Their relationship is not magically perfect, both characters carry emotional scars. Instead, it is a gradual transformation where two wounded people learn to support, trust, and find strength in each other. The ranch becomes a metaphor for their new life together, growth rooted in hard work, patience, and shared responsibility. Through ups and downs, they learn that family can be more than just blood relations. The child she is carrying becomes a symbol of hope, a living reminder that even in the most difficult circumstances, unexpected acts of kindness can lead to new beginnings and beautiful chapters in life. No one in the village spoke the name of the Blackwood estate without lowering their voice. The mansion stood on the edge of the cliffs like a dark crown, watching the sea with cold, empty windows. It had been abandoned for years, or so people said. Others whispered that someone still lived there. Someone dangerous. Alara didn't believe in rumors. She couldn't afford to. When the letter arrived, sealed with black wax and written in careful ink, she read it 3 times before her hands stopped shaking. The offer was simple. Generous pay, private residence, and one duty, care for the heir of the Blackwood family. There was only one warning. He is not like other men. The villagers had harsher words. Mad, they said, cursed, violent. Alara had almost refused. Almost. But debts don't disappear with fear, and her mother's medicine cost more each week. So, on a gray morning wrapped in mist, she packed her small suitcase and followed the carriage that took her away from everything familiar. The gates of Blackwood creaked open like they hadn't moved in years. The mansion smelled of old stone, rain, and silence. A tall man waited inside the entrance hall, sharp suit, a motionless face. I am Mr. Hawthorne, he said. You are Alara, she nodded. You will not leave the estate without permission. You will not ask questions that are not necessary. And most importantly, do not provoke him. Alara swallowed. Who exactly am I caring for? Mr. Hawthorne paused, just long enough to make her uneasy. Lord Adrian Blackwood, the last heir. She was shown to a small room on the east wing, far from the heart of the mansion. Before leaving, Hawthorne added quietly, if you hear screams at night, do not run toward them. That night, Alara didn't sleep. Sometime after midnight, a sound echoed through the halls, not a scream, but something worse. A deep, broken cry, filled with rage and pain, like an animal trapped in a cage. Her heart raced, every instinct told her to hide. But another voice, stronger, stubborn, pushed her forward. She grabbed a lamp and followed the sound. The west wing was locked, but one door stood open. Inside, the room was vast, lined with bookshelves and tall windows covered by heavy curtains. In the center stood a man. Adrian Blackwood. His dark hair was disheveled, his shirt half unbuttoned, hands trembling as he stared at something only he could see. A mirror lay shattered at his feet. "Don't come closer," he shouted, turning suddenly. His eyes were wild, stormy, filled with fury and fear. Alara froze. I'm Alara. I'm here to help you." "Help," he laughed bitterly. "They always say that." She noticed scars on his wrists. Old ones. Not from chains, but from battles no one else had seen. "You're not mad," she said softly before she could stop herself. His expression changed. Not anger, but shock. "You don't know anything about me," he snapped. "Then let me learn." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Adrian turned away. "Leave," he said, "before I hurt you." Alara didn't move. That was the first night she met the so-called mad heir. And strangely, it was also the first night in years that Adrian Blackwood didn't destroy something in his rage. Days passed slowly. Adrian avoided her at first, communicating only through short, sharp words. He refused meals unless she left them outside his door. He stayed awake at night and slept through the day. But Alara was patient. She spoke to him through the door, reading aloud from books she found in the library. Poetry, history, even silly stories meant for children. Sometimes he shouted at her to stop. Sometimes, he listened. One afternoon, while she was arranging books, Adrian appeared without warning. He looked different, cleaner, calmer, but guarded. "You don't look afraid of me," he said. "I am," Alara replied honestly. "But fear isn't always a reason to run." He studied her like a puzzle. "Everyone else ran. They didn't know you. And you do." She hesitated. "Not yet, but I will." Something unreadable flickered across his face. That evening, Adrian spoke of the past for the first time. Of a childhood filled with expectations, tutors, isolation. Of a father who believed cruelty built strength. Of a mother who disappeared one winter and never returned. "They said I caused her death," he whispered. "That my anger drove her away." Alara said nothing. She simply stayed. From that night on, the mansion felt less like a prison and more like a place holding its breath, waiting. But not everyone wanted Adrian to heal. Hidden behind polite smiles and quiet footsteps, secrets moved through Blackwood Estate. And far beyond the mansion walls, people who feared the heir's return were already planning how to keep him broken. Alara had come to care for a man they called mad. What she didn't yet realize was this. She had stepped into a story of power, betrayal, and a darkness that would test not only Adrian's sanity, but her own courage. And this was only the beginning. The change in Adrian was slow, almost invisible, but Alara noticed it before anyone else. He no longer locked himself away for days. The violent outbursts faded into long silences, and sometimes, into quiet conversations that stretched late into the night. Yet the mansion itself seemed uneasy. Alara began to sense it in the way servants avoided her eyes, in the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Mr. Hawthorne watched her more closely now, his polite calm hiding something sharp beneath the surface. One evening, while returning books to the library, Alara overheard voices behind the study door. "He is improving," a man said. "Too quickly." "That was never the plan," another replied. "The doctors declared him unstable. If he recovers, the estate returns to him." Alara's heart pounded. She pressed closer to the door, barely breathing. "An accident," the first voice continued. "That is all it would take. The girl is the problem." Alara stepped back, fear gripping her chest. So it was true. Adrian's madness had never been the real danger, his recovery was. That night, Adrian sensed something was wrong. "You're quieter than usual," he said, watching her from across the fireplace. "They don't want you well," Alara whispered finally. "Some people here, they're afraid of you reclaiming your life." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I always knew. Madness is a convenient prison." For the first time, he didn't sound broken. He sounded angry, and clear. Days later, Adrian collapsed during breakfast. Servants rushed in, claiming exhaustion, stress, weak nerves. But Alara noticed the bitter smell in his tea. "Poison," she confronted Hawthorne, her hands shaking. "You're trying to kill him." Hawthorne didn't deny it. He was never meant to rule. His instability keeps powerful men safe. "And you," his eyes hardened, "are disrupting years of careful planning." That night, Alara made a choice. She packed her bag, not to run, but to fight. With the help of a loyal maid, she stole ledgers hidden in the study, records of false medical reports and bribes paid to doctors who labeled Adrian insane. She brought them to Adrian. They wanted you silent, she said. But we can expose them. Adrian stared at the papers, his hands steady. All my life, I believed I was broken. You were betrayed, Alara replied. When dawn arrived, the mansion buzzed with chaos. Authorities arrived. Hawthorne was arrested. The false guardians fled. As sunlight poured through the tall windows, Adrian stood before the estate gates, no longer as a prisoner, but as its rightful heir. He turned to Alara. You could have left. I know, she said softly. But some stories aren't meant to be escaped. For the first time, Adrian smiled, not the smile of a madman, but of a man finally free. And as the gates closed behind them, Blackwood Estate exhaled, releasing its ghosts at last.